Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today I'm channeling my inner pirate on the hunt for Battleship Gold. As we've talked about in previous videos, we received a grant from the state that allowed us to hire 5 college interns from the state of New Jersey for the 10 weeks of summer when they're not in school. These interns have been helping us with a lot of collections projects, including going through our blueprints. And honestly, with them, the curatorial department here on the Battleship is probably the largest and most capable it's ever been. Curatorial is one of those things that's often neglected here at the museum. In fact, the curatorial department is also the education department. So if a tour shows up, we stop cataloging objects and start giving that tour. And then, of course, for the last several years, we've been planning for dry docking, which has been hugely time-consuming, has required a lot of research that took time away from working in the collection. So we've largely been trying to take care of the new stuff that comes in the door, new donations that people give the museum, but we haven't had a chance to go through the massive backlog of things that either came with the ship or was donated during periods when we didn't have multiple professional staff and several very capable interns working with us. One of those massive collections are the Philadelphia Navy Yard blueprints for the Iowa-class battleships that were given to New Jersey probably a decade before I started working here, thrown into boxes and thrown in a room. These blueprints may well represent the largest existing collection of Iowa-class blueprints that are concentrated in one place. So as the interns have been going through those, cataloging them so future researchers will know what we have and we'll know what we have and where we have it, they've been pulling out some of the really interesting ones. And one that they flagged is this blueprint right here, helium stowage incidental to meteorological facilities. And it shows this area right back here where we are. This forward bulkhead of this space is the aft fire control director, spot 2, that aims the 60-inch guns. And this column over here is the 5-inch director, Sky 4, the aftmost of the Mark 37 directors for the 5-inch guns. And the bulkheads you see on either side are the backing of the shields put in place to catch the blast from the aft battery of Tomahawk cruise missiles when they launch. So there's like a ceramic coating on the outside, and this is the steel backer plate that it's mounted to. During World War II, this space was the aft air defense warfare platform, where the assistant air defense warfare officer would have been for detecting incoming aircraft and, more importantly, identifying them visually to determine, that's American fighters, don't shoot at that. Japanese fighters, you know they're bad guys, but they're not that high of a threat. Japanese torpedo bombers, that's what we want to engage. So that would be happening back here. We did a video a very long time ago on Slater where they still have some of their air defense warfare style chairs, which are essentially recliners with binoculars on them. There would be 4 of them roughly in this area with an officer supervising. They'd just be looking around. The various radars would detect incoming aircraft. They might even have IFF to determine if they're friend or foe, IFF identification friend or foe by the end of the war, but largely detecting what we want to engage is a visual thing, even by the end of World War II. So that was done right here. Obviously, that's rendered pretty superfluous by the 1980s, and so this blueprint shows a plan to replace it with a meteorological suite. Specifically, if my count is right, stowage for 84 helium bottles. That will allow you to inflate weather balloons so you can launch them into the Arizona desert and confuse the citizens of Roswell for the next 80 years or so. These plans are produced at Long Beach in February of 1983. So this is while Battleship New Jersey is being reactivated there. However, the plans don't seem to be followed. And these blueprints give us a really, really good excuse to talk about one of the things that my mentor back in Baltimore told me to keep an eye out for when I'm looking at blueprints. Always remember, a plan is just a plan. Having the blueprint in hands doesn't mean it was actually done, which is why we saw this blueprint. We're like, I don't remember there being racks there. What on earth is going on? So we came up here to investigate because, honestly, this is a part of the ship that's very out of sight, out of mind. It's not on the tour route. It's enclosed on 3 out of 4 sides. You can only access it from the aft port side. We're on the O3 level, about as far aft as you can get. 1 level down and just a little bit aft of this director is the flight control booth for the helicopter that was added in the 80s. So this is like the extreme aft end. We are just about over top of turret number 3 back here. But as you can see, there are no racks here now. Does that mean that they were installed and then cut off and moved at some later date? Well, that requires some additional investigation. As you look around, we can see that there are weld marks in a couple of places. You can even see weld marks on the deck. Here's where they cut off and ground relatively smooth a mounting point. Here's a couple of circles. Those almost certainly mean stuffing tubes, which makes sense for the World War II context of this space where you're doing a lot of communication, visual identification and communication to the directors to tell them what to engage. So none of these weld marks seem large enough or in the right places to match up with this blueprint. If they did put helium stowage up here, it was not in line with this blueprint. It was to a significantly lesser scale. So before we talk about what they might have done instead, let's talk very briefly about why we have helium stowage on board. You might remember a time, December 1944, pretty famous, referred to as Typhoon Cobra, where Battleship New Jersey was Admiral Halsey's flagship when he sails through a typhoon. This typhoon sinks 3 American destroyers and does more damage to his 3rd Fleet than the recent Battle of Leyte Gulf that the ships had just survived. In early 1945, he sails his fleet through another typhoon, often referred to as Typhoon Viper. And during that typhoon, he had the bows ripped off of heavy cruiser Pittsburgh. He had the flight decks collapse on some of his aircraft carriers. He suffered more attrition from the weather than the Japanese Navy, which had functionally been defeated by this point in the war. The Navy has always put a high priority on weather because it is one of the most dangerous things to ships. Halsey had meteorologists on his staff. If we want to look at old weather data from like the 17 and 1800s, you go to old ship logs, and every single day the captains of those ships meticulously record the weather at the same time of day, and it's been hugely helpful for modern meteorologists tracking changes in weather and things like that. So predicting the weather on ships is hugely important, but Battleship New Jersey didn't really have any spaces specifically devoted to that. And by the 1980s, they convert at least 2 spaces in the superstructure to meteorological spaces on the 08 and 09 level, pretty high up. And the ship had a meteorological officer, even though we weren't a flagship anymore. It wasn't somebody on a fleet commander's flagstaff. It was just somebody embarked on the ship. Inflating balloons with helium so that they will rise and lift sensors with them up into the atmosphere is going to help you detect changes in wind current, changes in temperature, so that you can get a lot of the data that you need to be able to predict the weather more effectively. And that's really important for a ship like New Jersey, especially in the modern radar and missile age, because you can use storm fronts like that to hide the entire ship. How do you hide a ship when you've got radar, when you've got satellites and things like that? By tucking it under a storm cloud, you're obscuring yourself from satellites, and if it is a wartime situation, both you and your enemy probably don't have your radars on, because if you did, the enemy could track you back to where you are. So it started to become, especially during the radar age, a very common tactic to use storm fronts to hide your movement so you can surprise the enemy. So if this is important, and if this is something that they plan to put on the ship in the 80s, Why is it not here? Because I think they installed it somewhere else instead, even though we don't have any blueprints for it. Come with me, I'll show you. So we've descended one level from where we were. So now we're on the O2 level. This space is on the starboard side, and we're directly above 5-inch mount 55. And this is where 5-inch mount 59 used to be before it is removed in 1981 or 1982 during that reactivation. It's removed because of the deck installed overhead, which is for mounting the aft Tomahawk battery. So now there's not enough room for this 5-inch gun, and you need that weight savings to transition into the armored box launchers. But if you look behind me, we've got some of the rack stowage that shows up on here. And there's another space just like this on the opposite side of the ship overlooking Mount 56, where Mount 60 used to be. So my assumption is that instead of following the plans and installing these racks up there, they instead installed them down here. Here you can see we've got 4 separate racks. 3 of them are unlabeled. The 4th one, however, still has its tag adhered to the bulkhead. And you can see over here or over here, there were other tags that have since peeled off. So there's the potential that there were tags like this for all of the racks, and this is just the only one that survived. The archaeology just doesn't help us out at this point. Now the problem is, this says nitrogen cylinder stowage rack 3 for helo service. Nitrogen is very important for aviation stuff, specifically so you can purge fuel out of the refueling lines so that it's not a fire hazard later on. Nitrogen's an inert gas and it will displace the fuel. Something that the US learned after Coral Sea, before Midway, that really helped during World War II, and something that continues to be carried forward today. So we know that this rack of 3 cylinders is for nitrogen for the helicopter and not for weather balloons. However, we don't know about these other larger racks, and these other racks are designed slightly differently from this one. So there's still a chance that these are the helium racks. Why would they not follow the blueprint? I've got 2 possible reasons for you. One reason is you've got your bottles here. They're undercover. Look at how rusty these ones are that we acquired. They're not the right size. They're acetylene bottles. They're not even the right type for what should be here. But, you know, we had these empty racks. People asked us what these racks were for. These were the flasks we were able to get, so we put them in there. But look at how rusty they are from sitting outside exposed before we got them and put them here undercover. You know, this kind of surface rust doesn't really impact these flasks' ability to hold pressurized gases, but it does run off and stain the rest of the ship around it, which makes the ship look rusty and nasty. And the visible qualities of this ship was something that the Reagan administration took very seriously. They knew they were reactivating 40-year-old ships. They could not have the battleships looking like rust buckets. They couldn't look like a modern Arleigh Burke destroyer. Because at the end of the day, a modern Arleigh Burke destroyer is still a frontline, highly capable surface unit. Nobody questions that. Lots of people were questioning whether the battleships were still viable frontline units or if they were just rusty old hunks of junk that weren't good for anything. So by moving these undercover, it prevents them from getting as wet and weathering as much, which is going to protect the look of the ship. And maybe more importantly, this blueprint shows that where you're supposed to stow the balloons and inflate them is down here forward of the refueling boom aft of turret 3, or on the opposite side of the ship at the boat boom. So by moving these down just one level, we have moved the flasks closer to where we need to use them, and it's in theory easier to lug them up here. These things are freaking heavy, man. As one of the people who got these up here, they weigh a lot. It's hard to get them up a ladder. Easy when you've got a lot of 17-year-old, 18-year-old boys, but just keeping these from going down one more ladder or having to be carried up one more ladder makes it much easier to use them. And they're somewhat protected in here from shrapnel as well. Explosions, they're covered on most sides. So that may be why a decision was made to move these. Likewise, I don't honestly know if they would move the flasks down to where they're charging the balloon, or if they would bring the balloon to the flasks and then take it down here to charge. Assuming they've inflated their balloon, it's a big balloon, it's not like a party balloon, getting it down that ladder right there and through this covered area to get down this ladder to get down to the launching area is complicated. So at least if you're inflating it here, it's already under cover and you can pretty easily get it down. You're not trying to pull it down under these frames. So those are some possibilities that we've been able to think of as to why this might be the helium bottles we're looking for and why they are not where the blueprints say they should be. This blueprint comes from the 80s modifications box that one of our previous volunteers sorted all the blueprints out so that the interns can very targetedly find the right stuff when they're going through stuff. What is a section of the blueprints you'd like them to look into next? We've still got interns for 8 more weeks of summer. Woo! Let us know in the comments section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. That support allows us to keep doing research into the battleship, which expands our knowledge and understanding of this macro artifact that we have and allows us to share that with you. Did you even know that ships would have meteorological departments and be launching weather balloons? We didn't really think about it until these blueprints came up. You can support us at the link in the description below that has ways you can donate to the museum, or by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.